So this week, I was able to steal away with my lovely wife. She had a few days off. We spent a couple of nights downtown, and it was lovely to have some time away. Little did I know when we planned this little trip that it was also Devour Indie Week. If you're not familiar, Devour Indie Week is where all of the downtown eateries have a special menu where a lot of their best food is discounted greatly. So if there's a restaurant you typically wouldn't be able to go and afford, they have a much more amenable menu. Or maybe there's a place you've always wanted to try. It's a great program to get more people down to downtown. But when you're staying downtown and you're trying to figure out where you want to eat, every meal is a Devour Indie meal. What a wonderful time for your pastor to be preparing a message on gluttony. My goodness, there was a lot of food. And so I began to think about what it was that connects us to these things, but I wanted to begin with the social media component because that is our sermon series. It's not just the 7 deadly sins, but it's how many of our communication and social media platforms connect to these tendencies that we have, these propensities for sin, and how they prey upon our weakness to perhaps help us make decisions that aren't so great. So Yelp is the social media platform that we're looking at, and I want to read to you from their own self-description. This is what they say about themselves. Yelp was founded in 2004 to help people find great local businesses like dentists, hairstylists, and mechanics. Yelp had a monthly average of 32 million unique visitors who visited Yelp via the Yelp app, and 72 million unique visitors who visited Yelp via mobile web, so that's a web on a tablet or a cell phone, in the second quarter of 2018. Yelpers have risen, I guess that's Yelpers are the people that write the reviews. Yelpers have written more than 163 million reviews by the end of quarter 2 of 2018. See, they exist just to help you find a dentist. They exist to help you find a hairstylist or a mechanic. And here's their webpage. I don't see a dentist on there. So very clearly why they may have intended to start off as a means by which you can find out reviews of local businesses and whether or not you want to patronize them or whatever for mechanical car repair or a dentist appointment. They clearly are all about the food. And in fact, their subculture has spun off so much, it is all about the food. And if you look at some of the places in the reviews, gluttony is not too far away. It's all about the gluttony. Serving size is so massive for the money. You know, we in America have decided that the best way to determine the value of something is its quantity. How much is it, and how much do I get for that? Right? It's served in a bucket? Sign me up. Do I need a special towel to clean up afterwards? Yes! That sounds delicious. And then, in fact, their bloggers who are part of this Yelp culture continue it on to say, the Las Vegas 7 Sins Tour, gluttony. Really? In our culture, we have to have a tour of the 7 sins? My goodness. So little that's tongue-in-cheek, of course, just to indulge. So the question is indulging the sin, is eating the sin, is overeating the sin, is obesity the sin? Where in this whole idea of gluttony is the sin located? And I hope that by the time we're done this morning, you'll hear truly where that is. Because we serve someone who was accused of being a glutton. One of the many, many, many different criticisms of Jesus was because he ate with sinners and tax collectors that he was a glutton, because he ate and enjoyed his food. Well, of course, if Jesus ate and enjoyed his food, and the people who opposed Jesus criticized him for that, and we all know it was more for the fact that he actually would share a table with a prostitute or a tax collector or a stinky fisherman. I mean, everyone else is just putting all this perfection on him and these expectations of who they thought he should be eating with. Because to sit down in Jesus' day and to share a table with someone was to say that you like them, that you didn't maybe know them. You didn't maybe understand what was going on in their life. Yeah, it doesn't matter. But you'd sit down and you'd eat with them. And that was a sign of peace. You know, today, I mean, think about who shares your table. When was the last time you ate with a stranger? Oh my gosh, how terrifying is that, right? One of the times my wife and I ate dinner this last week, we were at an overcrowded restaurant that was so loud we had to it was really cute because it looked like we were going to kiss all the time. People thought we were probably so romantic. But we were just trying to hear each other. What did you say? Mom just texted. The kids are fine. Okay. It's just, and then I could touch elbows to the guy eating next to me. And I was just like, this is my table. Why are you close to my table? I know they don't technically touch, but your table's over there. I don't want to hear your conversation, yet I can't stop listening to it because I'm a nosy human being. But those are the things. You know, when was the last time that we purposely found a way to engage someone in conversation that we were not familiar with? Another case in point, when was the last time you were on an elevator? You ever strike up a conversation on the elevator? No. Face forward. Don't talk. Don't look. Don't make eye contact. Someone might talk to me. Don't make eye contact. We love our little bubbles in our culture. We do not like anyone breaking them. The problem is we serve the one who is like the expert at popping those bubbles and saying, you don't need that. You need to engage in conversation and in relationship in the people in your midst. You need to know who you're living around. You need to know folks. You need to know stories so you can appreciate the life of someone else. I don't know how we do that. I think the church offers some really great ways to do that. Our Fun with Friends group is going to Garfield Park today and going to have fun. I mean, just part of the being engaged in the culture around us is really, really important. So what is gluttony? Well, the dictionary definition, I mean, if you want to go technical, is habitual greed or excess in eating. So there's another tie to another sin, right? Greed. So greed or excess continually regarding food. So we talked about what greed was. So we kind of understand that I never have enough. And so then when that then is connected with food, it becomes and spins off its own sin, which is gluttony. The early church did not like gluttony. And in fact, the early church was very persecuted. So the early church didn't have a lot of people with money. So the early church didn't have a lot of people with an abundance of food. So go figure, the early church thought that indulgence in food was sinful. So one of the early church fathers, St. John Chrysostom, said that the results of gluttony are discharge of phlegm, picos running from the nose, hiccups, vomiting, and violent belching. The increase in luxury is nothing but the increase in excrement. Well, sign me up for the sizzler. It is this whole idea that the notion of eating food for pleasure is sinful. Anything, and then you go back to this whole other thread of theologians and church traditions that believe that anything pleasurable or nice was sinful. Many of our early Methodist forefathers and mothers believed that even adorning a church with stained glass windows was so very wasteful because that money could have been given to folks who were hungry. So it really is this conversation that we can't have agreement on, is at what point are we allowed to enjoy our lives? Jesus said, I came to give you life, and not just life, but life abundant. Is that because we know we're going to heaven after we die? Or could that be that a follower of Jesus is so in tune with what's important in life, they enjoy living? And I'm sorry, friends, but part of living is eating. So why would you eat in a way that does not bring happiness, joy, or satisfaction? Now, there are some of us in this life that can't, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But as we look at gluttony, look is a very appropriate word because we have this vision, we have this idea of what a glutton looks like. And apparently, within our own country, being overweight has become an epidemic. The Center for Disease Control estimates that over 75%, 3 out of every 4 people in our country, of the American population will likely be overweight or obese by 2020. That's a year and a half. The latest figures from the CDC show more than 1/3, that's 36.5%, of U.S. adults aged 20 and older, and 17% of children and adolescents between the ages of 2 and 19 were obese. $66 billion are spent annually in our country for dieting fads and materials. $66 billion. That's more than we spend on education, training, employment, and social service. Just trying to get thin. We spend more in dieting than the gross national product of Ireland. Let that sink in. We spend more on dieting than the entire gross national product of the country of Ireland. So what's harmful? What's healthy? A lot of times we hear it's too expensive to eat right. Well, I mean, case in point, it's not always the case, right? I mean, a family of 4 can eat some simple proteins, leafy vegetables, some whole grains, even some potatoes. Spend about $13.78. Or the same family goes to McDonald's and spends nearly $30. And the calories down at the bottom are a lot more simple and easy for your body to process. And the stuff on the top has a lot of preservatives. I mean, even the buns have sugar in them, a lot of sugar. Look that up sometime. How many grams of sugar are in a hamburger bun at a fast food restaurant? Blow your mind. So clearly, it's cheaper to eat healthy if you have access to healthy food. If you look along the demographics of different folks and ethnic changes, or if you look on socioeconomic and poverty levels, you will find a higher likelihood of obesity along those lines. Why? Well, if you're living in a small concrete box in the middle of a large metropolitan area, where are you getting fresh fruits and vegetables? I mean, there's a lot of resurgence of people finding ways to grow a garden on a rooftop of a skyscraper, and apartment complexes and community gardens are popping up. But for the most part, by and large, people are spending the majority of their lives eating only processed foods. And do you believe that there are addictive chemicals in processed foods? Don't you believe that if you only ate that way for your whole life, the thought of eating a green leafy vegetable would just be horrendously scary and nasty and wouldn't taste good at all? Because all you're used to eating are processed carbohydrates. So as we realize it doesn't cost more, that's true, but only for those of us who have access and who are willing to do that shopping. And a lot of times, if we're poor, the food that we get is processed and unhealthy. I mean, that's why I'm so proud to be on the board at God's Bounty. I mean, we do our best to get as much food as we can for folks. There are some vegetables and canned vegetables and things that come out, and every once in a while there's fresh produce as it's in season and we have it donated. But for the most part, across this country, groups like ours, all we're doing is trying to stop the hunger. We are feeding people so that they're not hungry. We're not feeding people so they can be healthy. Now, there are different groups that have different philosophies, but by and large, that's the way that it is. When asked what the worst invention that will lead to the downfall of humanity was, William Raspberry said that it was refined sugar. He goes a little far, but let me share what he said. He said, earlier when humanity wanted to satisfy its craving for sweetness, it had to wait until it found some honey or until the fruit crop had ripened. Now with refined sugar, we can have sweetness anytime we want. A genetically induced craving could be satisfied instantly without delay or unruly cost. He said that it's led to drug addiction, overeating, and a host of other problems. I don't know that it's led to all that, but it is definitely a problem. To the point where we have diets who, no carbs, sugar busters, all this different thing. So these groups that all work together to try and push these things out of the human diet. I'm such a creature of habit, and I've eaten enough processed foods in my life, it's hard for me to give it up. And then I don't know if it's like this for you, but what do? I have that insatiable craving for sweet things, so what do? I'm not going to do without it, and of course I'm not good enough to eat it in moderation, So I'm going to find something that's got some kind of chemically lab-created sweetener in it. I'm going to drink a soda because I grew up loving a Coca-Cola, so I'm going to drink a Coke Zero that's got a sweetener in it that possibly is linked to cancer. Why? Because I want something sweet. And I do it. I don't know if that's what it's like in your life or not. That's what it's like in mine. And it stinks. It's just when I start doing well, I'm like, look at all the water I'm drinking. Look at all the water I'm drinking. I'm not drinking soda. Ooh, a Coke. So is a glutton a fat person? Is that what it is? Because that's what we all think. I mean, let's be honest. When we think about look at that glutton over there. You don't expect to see the guy that's, wearing his jogging shorts and, sipping on a glass of mineral water, right? Look at that glutton. We all have a preconceived notion of what we think is healthy and unhealthy. And we all have a preconceived notion of what we think is acceptable and beautiful and what we think is ugly. And so if 3/4 of all of us in the United States are overweight, but yet we all know the ideal is not to be, what does that do to our brains? What does that do to our sense of self? And what does that do to our sense of self-worth? Now it becomes theological. Now it becomes a God thing. Whenever you're dealing with your identity, it becomes a God thing. Whenever you're dealing with your health, it becomes a God thing and, hopefully, your physician thing. Because it's one thing to say, well, you shouldn't eat that. It's not healthy. Oh, okay. It's another thing to say, I got to have this. I just have this craving. And although excessive fat can be due to a variety of factors, most of us, whether we'll openly admit it or not, ascribe obesity to laziness, lack of self-control, or emotional problems. We look at someone, we've got them all figured out. We haven't eaten with them, we haven't visited with them, we don't know their story, we've got them all figured out because they're heavy, they must have this. In our culture, we have a lot of sensitivity, and we should, for folks with eating disorders like anorexia or bulimia. We should be compassionate about that. But why is it that we look at other folks who are larger, who can't stop eating, and who are medicating themselves with their food? And why is that so disgusting? Folks, those two different kinds of eating disorders, those two different kinds of lifestyles, those two different kinds of brokenness are two sides of the same coin, and both sides deserve Christian compassion. I don't mean we become permissible to oh yeah, eat whatever you want. God loves you just as you are. But can we stop with the shaming to the point that people who are a few pounds overweight or more start feeling like they are less of a human being because of the way they look? Do you know what that does to the inner workings of the human soul when all you do is look in the mirror and feel worthless? You look at the shell of what you've become, a much larger shell of a much smaller person once. That's my journey. That's what I struggle with. That's what it's been for me. And then that constant effort of trying to reprogram myself to eat differently, to have more activity. It's a God thing at that point. So if I then turn back to the sugar and I turn back to the carbs and I eat at like midnight because it's loaded fries sounds so good and I just had such a rough day, now I'm medicating myself. Now I am medicating myself and I'm not using pills. But it's the same mechanism. Did you know in your brain, when you eat carbohydrates, you have the same chemical released that an opioid addict has? We talk about the opioid crisis in our country. When someone pops those pills or shoots up their heroin or whatever, they don't experience heroin. They don't experience oxycodone. They experience dopamine released in their brain, just like you do when you have a sundae loaded with hot fudge, just like you do when you have loaded fries with all the trimmings. The release of dopamine takes place when we eat carbohydrates. We are all susceptible to falling into that pattern of treating ourselves when we treat ourselves. So, Aristotle would have said all things in moderation, right? He would have said, well, you can, and most of the diet things, I'll come back to that too. The things that work are the things that let you live your life. Stop doing the things that are so very harmful and start doing some others. One of the things we're going to do here at Act United Methodist Church to try and help, and I'm going to do it too, is we're going to try and keep track of our steps. So if you've got a pedometer, if you've got a smartphone, you have the capability of counting your steps. If you, for your health insurance, you've already got a Fitbit or something like that, start keeping track of those. And every week between now and Christmas, we're going to log our steps and see how far we can go. Our first goal is to get to Bethlehem before Christmas. So we're going to count our steps, and we're going to see if we can get to 6,600 steps, or 6,600 miles, and do that. Now, our friend Carl Tope has been running so much, I think he has that in 1 month. So we might have to weigh some of this, or we might be able to get all the way into the Near East where the wise men came from, and we might be able to hook up with them and come back for Christmas. I don't know. Let's see how far we get. And let's use activity, not exercise. No one likes to exercise. People like to be active, though. So let's be active together. Let's do some activity. Let's form walking groups. Let's form ways where we can encourage each other. You see, if we spin forward into the positive of just being a little more active, then a lot of the self-shaming and the issues with food will disappear. Our metabolisms will kick into another little notch, and it'll be easy. And there are some folks who work out every day, and some folks who just have some genetic issues where it's just, or have a lot of pain and can't be active. There are all kinds of ways that we can adjust that. So let's just do something tiny. Take one small step to a healthier you. This is not a New Year's resolution kind of thing. This is can our church family love each other into a healthier church? We try to do that with theology. We try to do that with Bible study. We try to do that with fellowship. But can we do that with our health? So I want you to be in prayer for each other. I want you to pray for the people in your church, and I want you to pray for their health. And then I want you to do something for yourself. Whatever that is. I'm not going to tell you how many steps you have to have. I'm not going to tell you what kind of activity you have to have. I'm going to try and dust off my rowing machine and see if I can row to Palestine before Christmas. I don't think I can. I'll probably need some, big rescue on the way, but that's okay. I got you with me. So let's do that together. Let's do that together. So we'll have those cards and more information coming out on AgapeNet, and we'll have that this week. So here's the other side of gluttony, and this is how I want to wrap up, is because we get so into this fat shaming with gluttony and overeating, because when you overeat, you do gain weight. So there's a correlation there. So here's what C.S. Lewis wrote all those years ago in his book, Screwtape Letters. This is the interview or the communique that the devil is putting out to Wormwood as they're talking about their job and how successful they are with tempting humanity. He says, "But what do quantities matter, provided we can use a human belly and palate to produce querulousness," someone who likes to argue, "impatience, uncharitableness, and self-concern." Glubos has this old woman well in hand. She's a positive terror to hostesses and servants. She is always turning from what has been offered her to say with a demure little sigh and smile, "Oh, please. All I want is a cup of tea, weak but not too weak, the teeniest, weeniest bit of really crisp toast." You see, because when she wants a smaller and less costly than what has been set before her, she never recognizes as gluttony her determination to get what she wants, however troublesome it may be to others. Her determination to get what she wants, however troublesome it may be to others. Now, of course, gluttony has a tie-in with pride, with greed. Someone prideful that says, "Well, look at me. I'm not heavy. I'm not a glutton." Someone, in their use of food in this way, their appetites, in the tormenting of other people, kind of sneaks into the sinful zone, doesn't it? So what then is the sin? Well, the sin of gluttony is how we judge others by their appearance. The sin of gluttony is how we use food in an idolatrous way, that we put it ahead of God, that it is our major and only source of comfort. And we use it to make ourselves feel better in a dangerous way to our health and our relationships. The sin of gluttony is how we selfishly revel in the variety of flavors that we can enjoy without being generous to those who cannot afford to eat well. Judging someone as being fat or lazy puts us more dangerously close to sin than they are for their choices. When we judge someone else as being fat and lazy, it puts us more dangerously close to sinning than they do for their choices. That's the two-edged sword of gluttony as a sin, and why it's so deadly is because we sneak right into it, because we think it's just about quantity. We think it's the attitude. It's the priority. We all have a God-shaped hole in our lives, and we have spent all of our lives trying to fill it. And praise be to God if that's what we found, is God. God fits perfectly in the God-sized hole. But when we lose our way, remember what repentance means? Literally means to turn 180 degrees and head in the opposite direction. So when we've started walking away from God, that feeling of being disconnected then inspires us or terrifies us or makes us worry so much that we start trying to put other things. Well, this relationship with God is clearly not working out, so I need to fill my life with other things. Well, I feel good when I eat. Maybe I should just eat more, then I'll feel really good. And see, there's an unhealthy relationship that can develop between ourselves and food. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't eat and enjoy it. That definitely doesn't mean that we can't have cheat days and enjoy some of the things that are nostalgic and comfort food. I'm going to be firing up the smoker today for Labor Day weekend. I mean, it's going to happen. But how am I going to prayerfully adapt my life to be a healthier me? What do I owe my wife and kids to be a healthier version of myself? How we affect others in our relationships, isn't that a God thing? How we care for those that we love and that love us, isn't that a God thing? So, it's not easy. That's why we need each other. That's why I'm glad I've got you. Trying to fill God-shaped holes in our lives with anything and everything but God, and when we do so with food, then we're gluttons. But you know what the good news is? That Jesus forgives all sins. And Jesus loves us, no matter our choices, whether they're healthy or unhealthy. That if we have unhealthy relationships with food or not enough of a healthy relationship with activities, Christ loves us. And Christ will help us get on a path that's a much healthier one for us all. What's one of the most used words by the Apostle Paul in the epistles? Encouragement. Encouragement. As he's writing to all these churches, as he's writing to all these struggling congregations, be encouraged. Encourage each other. I think that's a good word for today, don't you? Be encouraged. Be encouraged. So when we look to the large table spread of great food, remember that Jesus ate and drank and enjoyed it to the point they called him a glutton. Now, granted, he was probably walking 30 miles a day too, so keep that in mind as well. Can't forget that. So no matter if you're sitting down to a family feast, brown gravy, brown chickens and brown cows and all those things, so be it. Do the best you can. Know that you're loved. And let's love each other. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and all God's people said, Amen.